that belief, which became my foundational operating system, was I'm not wanted or I'm not lovable. Now, because I say that now and add the caveat again to say that I had an incredibly great upbringing, but at an unconscious level, that's what was formed. So think about what it's like to operate from a place of not feeling wanted, not feeling lovable. There's an inherent lack of connection there.
I got tired of walking around with a mask on, smiling but my heart singing sad songs. Yeah, I was living for myself. I was dead wrong till I got the call, no cell phone. Man, you talking to the real me.
So, in terms of the podcast itself, I normally run through a certain criteria of really your own backstory. For those of you guys that don't know Dan, would you consider yourself a mental performance coach first?
Yeah, primarily mental performance coach, but also a therapist with a specialization in the area of addiction as well.
Which is why predominantly you're here today, because we're going to talk through some cool topics with a chance to tell your own story, really. I mean, this is episode 2, so the structure of the podcast are going to kind of evolve. But what I always want to start off with is just really understanding for every single guest that comes on, in terms of the brand, Uncompromised, like what does that mean to you as a person?
Uncompromised?
Yeah, as a statement, as a man, what does that mean to you individually?
Uncompromised. That's an interesting question. For me, it takes me to authenticity. Uncompromised in nature. For me, yeah, it takes me to authenticity because I spent such a long time living inauthentically. So uncompromised in my presentation of self to the world. Now, does that make sense?
100%. Because it was interesting because obviously like your background's so different. Say we had like Reese on, his performance, his background is all about performance. So for him, it was always like, okay, how can I not compromise myself in performance? But I kind of had a feeling yours would be tailored towards more like the mindset and standards and values, which leads me on to kind of asking and thinking about exploring specifically when was the time where you weren't living uncompromised in your life and your own journey. So what strikes or comes to mind specifically for you, a time in your life where you weren't living to the values of uncompromised where you're at now?
I can kind of reverse engineer that and say there was a time when I was compromised.
Yeah, essentially.
Right? Yeah. I was compromised up until age probably 22, 23, I'd say. That's when I became aware of who I was and more specifically where I was out of alignment with myself.
Yeah.
You know? So I was compromised insofar as I was living a life that I thought other people wanted in me rather than being authentic and true to myself and living a life that I wanted to live. So it's kind of...
And what was that life?
It was working in an environment which was quite toxic, in a sales environment. Now, naturally, working in sales, there's almost an expectation of you to apply different masks for different customers, almost like a chameleon. That's what it was pitched to me in my early years in sales. It was you need to apply a different mask for each customer because they're going to expect something very different of you. Now, that naturally causes misalignment because you're not really ever applying a mask that is just genuinely you. It's always going to be someone.
Like you're talking about before, what is uncompromised to you?
Yeah.
So what, in terms of that, like what path did that lead you down in terms of compromising yourself?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It took me down the path of partying.
Yeah.
A lot. Because not only was I applying different masks for people who I'd be trying to sell to and pitch to, I was inherently applying different masks based on what people I saw value in connecting with. And it was almost superficial, surface level connection, as you may have experienced yourself. It wasn't like deep, vulnerable connection. It was just, let's go out, let's get some Coke, let's get some MDMA, let's drink till the early hours of the morning and just party. And whilst I say there wasn't deep, vulnerable connection in that, sometimes there was. You know, sometimes there actually was quite profound levels of connection. And to take a slight side track here, something which comes to me now because it's come up in conversations recently, that I lost my mum when I was 18. And I'm adopted as well. There's another layer to that. I'm adopted and I lost my adopted mum when I was 18. And talking about the partying, interestingly, a lot of those conversations which I had with people, particularly when I was on MDMA, actually helped me process that, which is really quite interesting.
I mean, that is really interesting because it's actually something I was going to bring up in terms of like steering the conversation later anyway with my own experiences. For those of you guys that don't know, me and Dan, I actually reached out to you, didn't I, to kind of work on some of my own shit with regards to like self-destructive habits, which is how the brand got built. You know, overcome my own addictions, whether we want to call them that or whether it's more like habits. We'll get onto that as well, is obviously wanting to reach out and overcome that, and that's kind of how we built that relationship. But there's definitely a conversation to be had around that whole, the research that's coming out with regards to like, could recreational drugs play a part in recovery from not necessarily addiction but from trauma, and you know, open that opportunity to open up on a level. Because my experiences with partying is like, and I get this whenever I go to anywhere, like a social event, wedding, wherever it is, you get guys that when they've had a drink, when they're intoxicated, when they've had some sniff, coming up to you and suddenly they start opening up. And it's like, I say this all the time to the guys on my team and the guys that I coach, is like, what would it take for you to have the confidence to actually have those conversations without being under the influence? And like, so many of them are just like, well, it just doesn't come to mind unless I've had a drink or I've had a line of coke or I've whatever. And I think that's something that I'd really love to see a big change, especially like within the fitness industry, especially people trying to bridge the gap between opening up and not necessarily like the self-destructive habits and coping mechanisms, but it's like, where's the line between actually just having those honest conversations and then using it as a crux? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think something I wanted to ask you specifically about from a point of curiosity is like, what is the difference or what is the definition of addiction to begin with? Because I was always really curious of, when I was partying a lot, you know, am I actually an addict? Am I actually just someone who enjoys partying and enjoys the crack with the lads? Do you know what I mean? So could you jump on that for me?
Yeah, it's subjective, and there's a lot of different definitions for it. Some people will tell you that addiction is a chronic brain disease, which I don't agree with.
Like a dependency.
Well, that's another conversation, the difference between dependency and addiction, because there is an inherent difference there, which we'll explore later. But to just get clear on this definition of addiction, like I said, some people will tell you that it's a chronic brain disease. Others might say that it's an unconscious attempt to self-soothe pain, which I know that resonates with me.
100%.
Definitely resonates with me. But to simplify it, distill it into its simplistic form, it's any behavior that we continue doing despite the known negative consequences. That's the key part, the end, that despite the known negative consequences.
Right.
Because we know that there's going to be something detrimental as a result of it, but we keep going back to it anyway. Okay, well, why?
So what would you say the tendencies and major signs of addiction are? So for guys who are listening to this, which a lot of the guys that I work with, you know, the ethos of the Uncompromised brand is to help guys embrace that next phase of their life and overcome the self-destructive habits holding them back from the physique, the professional life, the connection, the relationships that they want. There's a lot of guys that perhaps would watch this and they're the typical weekend offender. They go out, you know, innocently going out to meet the lads, having a few pints. We all know 3 pints that someone starts nudging, should we get a bag in or whatever. It's that kind of conversation. What separates that from addiction? Do you know what I mean? And that's something I feel like it was a question I used to sit on quite a lot of, around thinking, you know, where's the line? And I think, like you said, from what you've already said, in terms of it's kind of contextual to the person, isn't it? And like, not everyone is an addict, but someone might have addictive tendencies.
Yeah.
So what are the major signs, would you say?
It's about, you have to have a really difficult, honest conversation and a deep look in the mirror more than anything.
Yeah.
You know, as addiction's a continuum. It's not an on-off switch.
Yeah.
And everybody is going to have addictions to some degree, whether they're positive or negative, because you can have positive addictions or negative addictions.
Yeah.
And I guess in that case, looking in the mirror and saying, is this a problem? Now, arguably, any amount of cocaine that you're putting up your nose is a problem, because some
the negative drawbacks mentally the next day, your emotions are all over.
Yeah, that's right. And the conversation which I have with my addiction clients quite regularly when we're working on something like cocaine is usually it's a matter of lack of confidence with cocaine.
So they take it to create that artificial
confidence in a bag a lot of the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
I relate to that. When I used to go out and take cocaine and I saw an attractive woman which I wanted to go and speak to, I could do that on cocaine.
Or if you take the piss and then you get all stiff and you can't actually get your words out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And those kind of conversations, or coming back to this idea of those difficult, vulnerable conversations that you have stood around the kitchen table at 4 o'clock in the morning with your mates, talking about actually really quite deep, meaningful subjects. I didn't feel safe to have those sober. I wouldn't have had those sober.
So that's what I was kind of getting at before when I speak to a lot of, in my own experiences, like guys will come up to you at a wedding and because they know you're a coach and you feel kind of, they have that automatic trust and like, they feel safe talking to you about certain things. Just saying to like some of my friends, I'll message some of my friends after big nights out where they might confide things in me or whatever, and I'm like, why would you never reach out sober? And this is that huge stigma around just mental health in general with guys, which is a stigma that I'm really pushing for to change, which is why I've getting people like yourself on this podcast to really bring more awareness around it. But something that I've kind of played on in my own head is that the question of, is addiction actually always inherently bad? And this is a kind of switch that I wanted to talk to you about with regards to addiction in the fitness industry specifically, and how things like bodybuilding can be addictive. You know, going to the gym can be addictive. So what's your stance on addiction in terms of, I guess it's not always as black and white as good and bad, but can there be positive addictions?
Yes, there can be. But it comes back to that question of, is it a problem? Something which I heard a speaker say, I can't remember who it was specifically now, but he used an example of like personal development events. And in the fitness industry, there are lots of them. We was at one last week, and they're great. They really are good. But if somebody is addicted to those type of events whereby you're in a room full of like-minded individuals who are all aspiring to develop themselves and better themselves in some way, shape or form, and you're going to them really, really often, well, everyday life becomes quite challenging because you're up here
so high
all the time. Yeah, and that then becomes your normal baseline, so that anything less than that is going to be quite challenging. So
it feels numbing almost. It's not like, it's like that. I did a post in the seminar I did for my clients in December about that exploration versus escapism, and like I think it's the same thing with addiction. Is like addiction could be good or bad to some extent, but it's like, actually, is the positive addiction, say like you get obsessed, like you said, go into these personal development events, is that actually addiction or escapism from dealing with your real problems? And it's the same with people who overwork. They use that as an avenue to escape, but they frame it in the mind that it's okay because it's a positive thing. But really, it is the same thing as escapism, whether you're having a line of coke or whether you're overworking. And I think that's something that people aren't as aware of, that you can almost have like self-destructive habits that are almost would be seen in the public eye as positive. And I think that's not something that's readily understood by a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. And addiction is generally viewed as being about the substance or behavior. That's what it's kind of stigmatized to be, but it's not even about that. That's almost irrelevant. It's about what happens inside of an individual's brain as a result of something that is inherent within them.
Yeah, no, completely get that. There was, what's his name? I think I've got it jotted down. It was some kind of psychiatrist, R.D. Lane, psychiatrist, said that basically there's three things that people fear the most. It's like fear, death, and other people, death, and your own thoughts. They're the three scariest, fearful things to a human. And I think that links back to, in terms of your own thoughts, is that escapism thing. People are actually terrified to be sat and listen to their own thoughts and be left with themselves, which is why they go down this route of escapism. And I think what you were talking about with regards to like addiction being that thing, that self-soothing thing inside the brain, sometimes addiction can be really deep and come from like traumatic experiences as a kid. But sometimes it's not always as deep as that, and it's more just people looking to get that stimulation or some kind of connection and validation from a substance. Now, one thing that I did try to read into kind of like addiction and the research behind it, and one thing I came across was that why are some people more predisposed to being addicted to things than others? And from the conclusion that I got, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong on what I've come to, but what I've found is, or read, that people who go through, say, traumatic experiences as a child, might be abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, they don't develop the chemistry pathways to be able to release and stimulate things like serotonin, endorphins, dopamine, so that when they're almost like numb to those feelings. So as an adult, if they then take a drug that gives them and creates artificially that neurological response, they latch onto it like nothing else because they've never experienced that through their entire life. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. You're bang on the money there. There's 90% of the brain's connections are built outside of the womb after birth. The vast majority of those in the first 2 years of life. So all of those connections are taking place in the first 2 years of life.
Yeah.
Like over connecting. And then something called synaptic pruning takes place, which is where, as the name suggests, like pruning your hedge, those connections which don't get used as much get pruned. And that's when we solidify those connections, and that then forms our sense of self. But within that, as you've quite rightly said, if our essential human needs for love, connection, nurturing by mothers, fathers, if those needs aren't met at that point of our life, then our ability to produce feel-good chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, as you've said, that ability won't be that strong. So naturally, we will be more prone to addiction later on in life, and thus the addictive personality myth.
I get this all the time
because
like I've got a few friends who are like, you know, some friends come on board with coaching or whatever, or they're just generally like try and pick my brains about stuff. And a question I get asked all the time is like, why do I feel like I've got an addictive personality? And I'm always like, whether it's a girl or a guy, like I'm like, well, that's your mind almost telling you to explore your past a little bit more. Because if you feel like that, you've got to ask yourself why. And like I was saying about the neurotransmitters and that development through an early stage, it's like one of the other bits of the research, the main points I took away from looking into this topic was like, don't look at the bad of the addiction. Look at what the good of the addiction is to help with the cause, because if you focus on the bad, it's always going to be the same things. It's, deteriorating relationships, deteriorating health. What is the good that the addiction is doing for the person? Because if you can address that, then you can almost address the root cause and the problem. And when I talk about like self-destructive habits with my team, it's not necessarily about going that deep, because a lot of it isn't addiction based. It's more like habit formation. But it's like, okay, well, what need is that habit currently serving for you in terms of a coping mechanism? How, because ultimately coping mechanisms, they make you feel good. Whether it's overeating, watching porn, whether it's alcohol, overworking because it gives you that dopamine release of like you're doing something good. Looking at the root cause, okay, well, how is this currently serving you in your life? So for you, a question I wanted to ask you was, when you were working and even though you were in the position where you felt like you weren't living authentically, what was serving you in that circumstance when you were in the job that you didn't necessarily like, but you stayed in it?
Connection. Because that's something which I felt like was inherently missing throughout pretty much my entire life.
Right. And with like other high-performing people type thing?
Kind of, but it was primarily from a family point of view. So as I said, I was adopted at a very young age. Very grateful. Had an incredibly good upbringing, and I wouldn't be here had I not had the upbringing that I had from my adopted parents. But when we're children, particularly very young children, we're still forming our sense of self and a sense of what the world is. And that's formed by way of beliefs, values, which then create our identity. And because I was adopted at such a young age, that belief, which became my foundational operating system, was I'm not wanted or I'm not lovable. Now, because I say that now and add the caveat again to say that I had an incredibly great upbringing, but at an unconscious level, that's what was formed. So think about what it's like to operate from a place of not feeling wanted, not feeling lovable. There's an inherent lack of connection there.
And there's the need for it, so you'll find it in some shape or form in a different outlet or
that's
vice.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So
That's
I was just constantly searching for a form of connection, be that in a bag of cocaine with friends stood around a kitchen table at 4 o'clock in the morning, wondering why I was doing it, or whether that be a work addiction like I had when I was still working in sales, where I just wanted to push and push and push and keep working, keep earning validation from managers, from staff, from colleagues, because it was connection. In the actual addiction itself is almost irrelevant. That the undertone, the thread that connects them all together is that connection, which I was getting as a result of persisting in whatever the behavior or substance was.
No, that completely makes sense, because even like from talking to you when we had that first call, so when I was 18, my parents separated, my dad left or whatever, and then I pretty much went into like work mode. I was like fully booked as a one-to-one PT. Then I started the meal prep company. On paper, successful. I had everything you could want. I had the nice car. I was busy, doing okay financially, but I was still then going out and absolutely twatting it on the weekend. And like having had those conversations with you now, it was very clear to me now looking back that I was also just seeking that connection that I wasn't getting from feeling almost like the abandonment thing. And I think that there's so many things like that where you don't even have to look or scratch beneath the surface very much to start reverse engineering your behaviours, as to even for like guys who aren't necessarily been through like a lot of trauma, if you want to call it that. But it's like that whole thing where you're just like, okay, we'll just keep unraveling the piece of string, because it's like you can just almost trace the things back, and it just takes a little bit of scratching to actually find out that level of self-awareness that once you get to a point like you're able to talk about your past, I'm able to talk about my past. Once you embrace those things and you actually accept them for what they are, then it's like it opens a whole new opportunity of like potential to go forward. And this is what I say to guys all the time that feel like they're stuck in that phase of their life. I'm like, you're struggling to move on because you haven't accepted your past already. And that on face value confuses a lot of people, and it can be quite overwhelming and almost like standoffish. But then you get some guys that really take the time to reflect on like what's got them into the position that they're at now, and they just do a little bit of work to accept it, and then it's like they absolutely catapult in terms of suddenly they can start training consistently, they eat consistently, they're not self-sabotaging themselves or self-soothing themselves by overeating. I think it's fascinating just how everything we do is built on, our behavioural trends are built on that past experience almost.
Absolutely, it is. And life is suffering. Life is hard.
Yeah.
Even when you say, all right, I accept that I've got some shit that I need to deal with, and that's going to come with a pretty deep look under the rock. But under that rock is a really, really powerful, incredible journey waiting to happen. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's going to be really, really hard. But there's so much wisdom, particularly in a behavioural pattern like addiction, because it always comes back from somewhere. There's going to be something within that. There's a lot of energy which drives people towards those destructive behaviours. They wouldn't continue going back there time and time again.
It serves a purpose in some shape or form.
It does serve a purpose. Yeah.
So again, going back to like the fitness industry side of stuff, and like, it's funny when I talk to my family or like my mum about this, because you speak to anyone who's not really involved in the fitness industry, they automatically think, when you say to them the fitness industry, they think of bodybuilding. And it's like bodybuilding is such a small niche of the fitness industry, especially nowadays. Like, I think it's so strange that people, I think that they either sit in two camps. They're either really, really into bodybuilding, or they're really like anti-bodybuilding. And I've always found myself like sat somewhere in between, because I'm like, I don't think fitness is like, don't think it should put you in a box. It's like you find your own path, your own journey, what you enjoy doing. Like I box, I run, powerlift, I do some bodybuild. Who don't love an arm session? Do you know what I mean? And I think like for a lot of people, they can see it as this like obsessive thing. But then again, I always try to explain to people, because I have some friends who are really good bodybuilders and they're in great shape. I say, like, it's not obsessive. It's more just like it's serving a purpose and a need for them, like the structure, the control that they have over things. It's like, and that's what I was getting at about addiction being like a double-edged sword, in that it can be very detrimental in some shapes or forms, but then it also, like, if they are putting it into something positive, can it be an addiction be a good thing? And it's almost like I go in this circle with it with bodybuilding, and I think it's like it can be this really positive thing, but then I see kind of how it's portrayed on social media, that then I'm instantly like, okay, well, it causes more damage than good because of how many people slip into that like comparison mindset. And this is a topic that I wanted to touch on with you was about like the Instagram algorithm and how dangerous that is in terms of like addictive behaviors, and just, you know, people, not just people streaming and like flicking through reels, but the comparison mindset, because a lot of the content that people are consuming, especially men, is like soft porn. And that can be so detrimental for like self-worth issues, relationship issues. What's kind of your stance on it?
When you say soft porn, what do you mean by
Yeah,
that?
so like soft porn, like OnlyFans models on Instagram that are pretty much naked, but they're not. It's almost like the entry gate to, do you know what I mean? And then I think a lot of guys, it's an unspoken thing, but like so many guys are like addicted to that, and they sit and scroll and they'll look at it all the time, and then who knows, they might jump off, crack one off, and then they have shit connection with their girlfriends. And I think that's something that's not spoken about a lot in the industry, in the fitness industry especially. What's kind of your stance on it?
Yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head for me, and that is that it's likely to disconnect one from a meaningful connection with a partner, for example, because it's doing the same thing that porn is doing, insofar as it's setting an unrealistic expectation for what life is. It's completely distorting and changing the lens through which you view reality, right? Because we know that Instagram is a highlight reel. That's 100%. All Instagram is. It's a highlight reel. And if you're constantly looking through that and constantly being fed and absorbing that information, whether it's men looking at beautiful images of women, or the vice versa, because it can be either way, right? It can be women looking at images of men which
jacked guys that are all on steroids.
Steroids.
Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah, it can go either way. So it's just a case of having a bit of a check and saying, hang on a second, am I getting too sucked into this? Am I spending more time in this, what is, let's not fuck around, a virtual reality? Or am I still plugged into tangible reality where I spend my life? It's a really
real life
difficult...
versus the Matrix.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally. Yeah, one of the things I've kind of started bringing in with my guys is like almost like a social audit. You know, looking at things like simple basics, like if you want to improve your productivity, put a limit on your screen time, like unfollow people that you don't serve a purpose to you, including men and women that you just, you know, you're gazing over, stuff like that. And I think it's so overlooked how little steps like that can make such a big difference to, if you think of it as like creating bandwidth. And I love this term of like your mental capacity. You've only got so much bandwidth in a day, things that you can focus on. And I actually did a story about this today about like decision fatigue. How can you now refine your environment so that you're not wasting time focusing on things that ultimately don't serve you, or that are at least conflicting, giving you that conflicting mindset of stuff that you're not actually wanting to work towards. And something that's, I mean, I guess this is a bit far-fetched and deep, and a question that I wanted to ask you on. Do you think addiction has become more prominent as a result of Western culture and capitalism, based on the fact that we live in a fast consumerist society? And like the Instagram algorithm pretty much represents that, I think. You know, it's just like scroll, consume. Have you come across any kind of statistics with regards to like Western societies and the other side in terms of like addiction?
It's an interesting question. It is a multi-layered question. I haven't come across any statistics, but logically it makes sense. You look at the trends that we see going back over the past 5 years. Pretty much all media that we consume now is very, very short form. And
it's like 3 seconds you caught or not.
Yeah, absolutely. But then even within that, if you look at the vast majority of television programs that we watch, it will always change frame about every 4 or 5 seconds. So whilst you're watching a program which might be 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour long, your mind is recognizing change every 4 to 5 seconds because they're changing the frame. They're changing the scene.
Very stimulating, isn't it?
Exactly that. It's go, oh, this is new. This is new. And then you look at reels, exactly the same. Very, very short. There's lots of chopping and lots of changing. It's always short form, whether you're watching it in a 30-minute program or an hour program, as I've said, or in a reel. It's change over and over again. And if that is taking place over time, as it has been, slowly, it's kind of ramping up a bit now, but over the past 5 years, the short form media is all we're consuming. That's conditioning, which is going into our minds, and that's what we're becoming used to.
So it was just something that like I started thinking about. I was like, just in terms of how like looking at social media trends and like how social media is set up, and thinking it is architected and put in position, it's so easily and readily available. But like, what are the knock-on effects of that? Okay, well, you've got people, not just guys, comparing themselves to unrealistic expectations, so their level of self-worth is lower. Okay, well, when people develop low self-esteem, low self-worth, lack of connection, they don't feel they're good enough for other people, what do they then lean on? Coping mechanisms that making them feel better. So it's not like I'm coming up with this conspiracy theorist that capitalism is causing addiction, but there is some kind of rationale behind what my thought process was behind that today's society really isn't helping with reducing addiction or an environment that reduces addiction. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, addiction is definitely stigmatized.
Yeah.
And something which Gabor Mate, you may have heard of.
Yeah, so that's the guy that I was talking, he was the one that got me onto the neurotransmitter thing about birth and, you know, the neurotransmitters to be able to feel connection and dopamine and stuff like that.
Yeah. So he's
great.
He's incredible. Absolutely incredible. I completely agree with what he says insofar as in society today we'll typically view addiction with a question of why the addiction? Why are you addicted? When in reality, that's not what we should be asking. We should be asking why the pain, because there's always going to be some kind of pain which is driving people towards that behavior, as you've quite rightly said, whether it's a result of trauma. And just to pause on trauma very quickly, trauma doesn't need to be a newsworthy event. Trauma can be anything. It's not a result. It's not what happened. It's what happened inside of us as a result of what happened. And that could be anything.
So it could be like, so I was talking to my girlfriend Marta about this, because she's so she's way more clued up on this kind of stuff than I am, but she was explaining to me, it's like, I mean, I never thought it to that extent, but like trauma's seen as this big traumatic experience. It has to be like a car crash event, but it really doesn't. It could be literally someone saying something to you and it being so hurtful that you're like, it destroys you on the inside. And I think that is a big stigma around what trauma is. So especially when you say that to men who typically are driven by status and ego, you say, okay, well, have you looked into maybe looking at what your the trauma-related incidents that are causing you to behave in a certain way, switch off, and they put this barrier up because they don't want to be seen as vulnerable. And
so it's a very powerful question to ask that, and I do often ask that of my addiction clients. They say, I don't know why I can't just stop. I just want to stop. I say, well, what are you running away from? What are you avoiding? They go, what? I'm running away from anything. Really?
It's that escapism, like.
Well, how are you feeling when you tend to have a craving? Not great, anxious, stressed, overwhelmed. Okay, where's that coming from? And you just trace that back, and it will always come from somewhere. And like I said, it doesn't need to be a big deal. Someone falling over at a very young age and cutting their knee and being terrified at the sight of blood pouring down their leg.
I know a few people like that.
Yeah, that's trauma. That's not an enormous car crash or anything like that. It doesn't need to be. It can be anything. And it can even be something quite minor. Like, I was ridiculed for having ginger hair. That was quite minor, but compounded over time, that then becomes traumatic.
Yeah.
Again, it's just comments. It's just words. It's just vibrations coming into my
100%.
ears. But that is trauma over time. And it's important, particularly for men, to recognise that and own that.
Yeah.
It's a case of just scanning back and saying, okay, well, what is it that could be contributing towards this? And that's quite a difficult process initially, because it does come with looking in the mirror, metaphorically speaking, and saying, well, actually, might have something to deal with here.
And sometimes reliving that emotion, the feeling, the pain, and that can be quite...
Yeah.
Some people don't have, especially like, it's not making excuses for people, but if they're busy, they've got a lot going on, they don't have the emotional capacity to deal with things at a certain time in their life. And that's why I always say with like anyone that I work with, I'm like, are you 100% committed to this right now? Like, do you have the capacity to have the difficult conversations? Because I think like a lot of people like the idea of going through a transformation, but when you get down to it, like the raw emotion that sometimes comes with it, and you know, like I said, this isn't a case for every single guy that I work with. It's some guys literally can just focus on training and nutrition plan and they're going to get an amazing result. But for the majority of guys that I work with, there's going to be some kind of identity shift and emotional detachment from the person they were. It's like what you said about you got ridiculed for being ginger. It's like so many guys that I speak to are like have this attachment to who they were, whether it's like, oh, I've always been known as the big guy, or I've always been that guy, and there's that fear of like if they detach from that identity that they're no longer going to be wanted by their friends, their social circles. And it's like, but how would you know unless you try?
Yeah.
And is the value trade-off of trying worth or better than the discomfort that you're currently in? And that's always a really powerful frame to ask people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it usually is.
Yeah, it is. That identity piece is really, really interesting. So I was recently having a conversation with a very successful business owner, entrepreneur, and it was after I delivered a talk, and he was saying, you know, my business is in the best place it's ever been. Financially, I'm enjoying it more than ever, but the problem which I've got is I don't know who I am without my business. And I said, right, well, if I took your business away, what have you got left? He went, nothing. I've got nothing left. So that comes back to this idea of positive and negative addictions, right? If you're addicted to working and that's all you're doing,
it defines who you are as a person.
It defines who you are as a person, and that's when that addiction is defining you, which is a very vulnerable place to be. Very difficult place to be.
I think what you said about the mask thing, that stuck with me so much, about like what masks are you currently wearing. So like in our program, we look at the individual on 3 different levels, which is like the personal, which is the emotional side of stuff. How are you operating? How do you see yourself? Who do you believe that you are? You got the physical, which is, you know, that's your potential to create and achieve a physical result. The athlete, that kind of idea. And then the professional, which is your profession. Obviously, you know, it does what it says on the tin. Your work persona. You know, as much as you want people to be who they are at work, everyone has that persona for work. And it's like that I've actually used that frame that you've talked about before with like the wearing the masks of like, how can you now create less distance between each of the masks? Because I know personally that when I was working as an in-person PT, I had the meal prep company, and I was going out of the weekend back when I used to DJ a lot. It's like I had 3 masks that I was wearing. I was like the coach, the wisdom owl that could do no wrong, and that's not now how I would ever recommend someone to coach. Then you'd have like the meal prep business, the young entrepreneur, and then you'd have Mr. Good Time at the weekend who would just go out and absolutely send it and be out till whenever. And it's like I was living in such disalignment between those 3 people that eventually you're going to get to a point where you're like, I've had enough.
Who am I?
Who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to mention on this point, though, that whilst we don't want to apply too many masks so that we are living completely inauthentically and we don't know who we are, that's not really where we want to be. But
they can serve a purpose.
Persona can serve a purpose. Like right now, the way which we're talking, I would have a different level of conversation with my girlfriend than we're having right now.
Yeah, of course.
Now, in business particularly, having a persona is actually quite important, I think, because it demonstrates confidence, authority, and
how you want
leadership.
To be portrayed,
yeah, and how you want to be portrayed. And if that's authentic to who you are, that's not a problem, in my opinion. But if it's something that you're trying to embody to receive validation, as an example.
That's almost an act. There's a difference between a mask and an act, isn't there?
That's right.
Yeah, no,
that's right. If it's something which is authentically true to who you are and who you want to become, because that's really what a persona is. As an example,
it's amplifying certain characteristics.
Yeah, right. Like I often still feel nervous before I step out in front of an audience to speak.
Of course.
But my persona, which I want to step into, is someone who's confident and authoritative in front of a room.
Got you.
So I step into that and I lean into that, and it's uncomfortable and it's quite a challenge at times, but that's what I want to become. I want to become somebody who can hold space in front of an audience. So I'm stepping into a persona of someone who's confident. Does that feel like it's authentically true to me in that very split-second moment? Not always, but for me, that's growth. That's something which I want to lean into and I want to become. So I step into that persona. Does that make sense?
100%. Because, and again, like using my clients as an example, something I always say to people at the start is like creating the vision is 50% of the battle. Because if you want to create that identity shift from where you're at now to where you want to be and reverse engineer to find the missing piece of the puzzle, you have to have an understanding of who the person you want to be looks like in terms of how do they feel, how do they act, how do they behave. Because if you can identify that, you can reverse engineer the process to become that person with daily standards, habits, actions. But they have to be in a line with kind of, at least to some degree, where you're already at, and they align with kind of your core values and beliefs. And I think sometimes that's where people get such a big disconnect and friction with trying to create changes. Not necessarily like unrealistic expectations, because I do believe anyone can achieve pretty much anything that they want to when they put their mind to it. But it's like, if it's not something that they actually truly value, they're going to find it hard to actually be consistent to work into that new identity. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah.
And that's something that I think a lot of guys struggle with, is they have this idea in the head of like, say, attaining visible abs, right? They, in their head, they think it's to achieve that has to be someone who doesn't have a social life, only eats rabbit food. Their interpretation of that. So there's always going to be that disconnect and friction. When sometimes it's almost like a case of education to bridge the gap between those values and create less friction with that on an identity level, that it's not about you have to do things a certain way. It's like just work out what you value, and then you'll find the grooves that allow you to move into that person. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's important to identify where that's coming from, using abs as an example.
Yeah.
Why do you want abs?
Yeah.
Well, I've got a holiday coming up in 6 months' time and I want to look good. Okay. Why do you want to look good? Because then maybe I'll be a bit more respected by my friends. There
you go. It's a status thing.
Why do you want to be respected by your friends? Because I just don't feel that accepted. Right.
Yeah.
That's where it's coming from. There's always a deeper intent behind these things. And that's when you're getting into the area of beliefs and values, as you say, identifying what's the true driver there. And often I have these kind of conversations with clients and come to the realization that in this hypothetical example, don't even want abs.
And could they get more acceptance by actually just setting clearer boundaries, speaking the truths, telling other people how to treat them?
Yeah.
That is going to create more acceptance, more validation, more confidence than a physical achievement.
Absolutely.
And that's like a key message that I try and beat out to every single person I speak to, guys specifically, is that like, I will get you abs if you want to get abs, but let's scratch beneath the surface a little bit to see what is the real problem here. No, that's really interesting, mate. And it's a very powerful thing to give people like as a frame to just like, okay, well, what's the problem beneath the problem? Now, one of the final questions I wanted to ask you was around, we've kind of touched on this topic before just in general conversation, but can you go from a position or a place of being an addict to go back to perhaps moderation consumption with substances or whatever it is that you were addicted to?
It's very much dependent on the individual and the behavior or the substance. Example, moderating alcohol, probably okay for most people. For me, it's not. I've tried it, and it just doesn't work for me. Hence why I haven't drank for 14 months now, and I feel much better as a result of doing that. Other people, they can do it. A lot of people, I've met many people who can go about their whole lives and drink responsibly. So moderation when it comes to alcohol, probably okay. Can you moderate cocaine? Probably not.
It's so Moorish.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably not. So it's a case of, is it suitable for the individual? If yes, then yes, it's possible. If no, then it's probably going to be a question of abstinence. So when it comes to abstinence, there's a few different options. Something which I take my clients through regularly is just a reset process. So if somebody is struggling with some kind of addictive behavior, whether it be substance or process, like gambling, sex, porn, etc., then a 90-day reset process is something which I'd absolutely consider. That 90 days gives
confidence, momentum.
It just gives a break. It just gives your brain and neurology a chance to just reset, come back into some form of psychosomatic unity as opposed to disunity. Because when you're in that process of addiction, you're in a natural disunity between the mind and body. You're in the mind a lot. You're thinking about a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a question of, is it possible with the individual? If yes, then yeah, absolutely. If no, then abstinence is probably going to have to be an option.
Because I think that's one of the biggest things that I see with guys is, especially like, you see like typical 12-week transformation, right? Minimum I work with guys is 6 months because I don't believe in that quick fix. And as well, like you get guys lean in 12 weeks, you're going to have to go for a reverse diet anyway. So that's kind of the rationale behind why I only work with guys that long. It's long-term solutions to short-term problems type thing. But getting back to what I was saying with a lot of guys is they could probably abstain from alcohol for 12 weeks. And a lot of people do just to have that, like, I'm going on holiday, I'll do it. But I think for a lot of guys who say, not necessarily have an addiction, but it's that habit's ingrained in them where they drink at the weekends, they end up taking drugs, or even just over drinking, right? Or they binge eat after a night out, scran loads of food. For them, I know that from speaking to friends, there's that kind of question of like, okay, well, do I now to stop engaging in those behaviours have to go teetotal long term? And that's why so many people don't. It's almost like they beat themselves before they start because they think that's what it requires. Just like what I was saying with some guys believe, the belief system around, if I want abs, I have to eat just rabbit food. Do you know what I mean? It's like that belief system around it. And I think that 90-day reset, what you've said, for a lot of guys that I speak to, could be such a powerful just starting point. I mean, I guess that's why dry January is such a big thing. It's like a reset point, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a reset point. I mean, the key to overcoming any behaviour in the first instance is self-awareness. So another thing which I do myself, not so much these days, but have done in the past, is just to keep an awareness journal.
Yeah.
Because again, addiction is so automatic. We're on autopilot all the time. We're just doing behaviours, not even thinking about it. And then it's only when we reach the point of consequence that we're like, fuck's sake, I've done it again.
Yeah, we call it in the community like a fuck this moment, where you get to a point where you might catch yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
It might be like you wake up after one big night out where you know you took it too far and you're like, right, fuck this, I need to make a change. So in terms of reflection journal and questions, excuse me, could you give a few examples of questions that people could use on a weekly basis to just stay on top of their self-awareness?
Yeah, in the area of addiction, keeping an awareness diary, that's super simple. It's just date, time, where are you feeling it in your body? That's really important because the way which I work with all of my clients is always
sensory
body
awareness.
informed. Yeah, somatic, because emotion isn't experienced in the head. Sometimes it originates from the head, but particularly in addiction, being driven by some kind of wound or difficult experience that we've had, touched on trauma, that's going to be stored within the body. So the first step in any recovery is bringing tension back into the body and out of the head.
Yeah.
So where are you feeling it? What does it feel like?
Yeah.
Pressure? No pressure? Is it hot? Is it cold? Does it move? Is it still?
Yeah.
The questions we never ask of ourselves.
I was about to say, from doing some work with you and TMP, like that was the first time I've ever actually touched on that. And it was so interesting to actually then develop. It's like with the gym, you try and tell your clients about mind-to-muscle connection. It's the same thing, but just on an emotional level.
Yeah.
It's like, can you develop and raise that self-awareness to actually be more in tune with your body? Because, and this goes into not necessarily addictive behaviours of guys overworking, but something I say to my clients is like, okay, do you now have anchor points in your week that help you relieve stress? And some of those things, some people will see it as a bit as woo-woo, but like breath work, meditation, journaling for some doesn't work for some guys, does for others, but like breath work, how powerful that can be just to get you realign you back to your center to stop feeling that raw emotion. And it's so overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely is overlooked. Really powerful question, which completely changed my life when I learned it. And I'm pretty sure I asked you this when we had our initial call. If you could make a statement that you believe about yourself to be true, what would you say beginning with I? Now, that's a journaling question.
Yeah.
Because what that will do is that will cut through all of that noise that we like to throw up, analysing, trying to find reason and logic in what we do. And if you want to cut through that and simply get to the core of what's driving you and your experience.
It's a snapshot, isn't it? Especially if you said, like you'd said, with the date and time, followed by I, at that moment in time, you can look back at that and go, that is a snapshot of what I was feeling, how I was responding, my environment. And then if you're doing that regularly, you can look at trends.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and this is what I talk about guys with who particularly have problems with like overeating when they're stressed, or even stress fasting. I'm like, cool, when is this happening? And then it tends to be a general trend. Oh, it's always a Tuesday when I get called into late meetings and then I can't get my normal food and this and that. It's like people are very quick to dismiss things like that, but I think they offer such a powerful level of awareness around habit formation that sometimes habits it's as simple as just looking at your environment and like refining your environment, because it gives you like that bird's eye objective view. And I think that's why everyone can benefit from working with a coach it's like it's a spare pair of eyes to look at things objectively, not emotionally.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get asked all the time, like, why have you got a coach? I'm like, well, because I'm lazy and I don't want to program for myself. But other than that, it's like just that objective looking at my environment and going, okay, well, where are you perhaps just not being as efficient as you could be?
Absolutely. And let's face it, self-development isn't a destination.
Yeah,
it's a process. It's a
journey.
journey.
Yeah.
Like last week, I had one of the most profound therapy sessions I've ever had. And I've been in therapy for over 4 years. And I still meet my therapist at least once a month, even if I've not really got anything going on. Because there's always stuff. We've always got things to work on. Sometimes it takes a little bit of digging. Sometimes it's just a bit of maintenance, like you'll have with your coach, and I've got
gardening.
with my fitness coach.
Yeah, gardening. Like even if it's a positive thing, it's like, oh well, that session was amazing because it helped me just dwell on the positive.
Yeah.
And men don't do that inherently anywhere near as much as they should.
I think that's pretty much everyone, though. To be honest, I mean,
no one gives themselves credit.
We are hardwired to pay more attention to negative situations because they've got a higher survival value. It's something which is pre-programmed into us, but that can be positive because it protects us from danger. And we haven't got saber-toothed tigers running around anymore, but we do have positions where we could face rejection, which is what a lot of people steer away from, and they fall into addictions. But again, that's another matter. But then because we're wired that way, it becomes very difficult to actually acknowledge things that we've done well. And you might experience this with some of your clients when they get a win, they're kind of like closed off or reluctant, don't want to say,
the pat on the
I've
back.
done really well here.
Yeah.
It becomes an actual challenge and much more difficult to help people recognize what they've done well as opposed to own
the weird
challenges.
thing is, like, the guys I work with, they're kind of like sit in two camps. I've said this before, like they're either in a lot of pain and they have been for a long time, or most things in their life are going well, but there's one area, either the personal, the physique, or the professional, that's not. And it's like, okay, how do we just take them to that next level? But regardless of which camp they're sat in, it's the same with every single one. It's like there's this assumption that they should just be able to do it by themselves. And I think that's like a very much, I call it toxic male trait. I don't really like that term, but it's like, I do think it's something that a lot of men naturally just believe, is that you should just bear the burden and be able to crack on with things yourself.
Yep.
I mean, we have in the community something called Action Plan Sunday, which is just like a worksheet. It's almost like an opportunity to plan your week out and a reflection tool. And so one of the three like reflection questions we do is just, okay, what's one thing you need to stop, start, and keep doing this week? Because even that is just bringing more awareness around like positivity of, okay, what do you need to keep doing? You're doing well. And even that can just be like 1 to 3 things to focus on. Helps so much.
Yeah, something which we ask all of our clients in TMP is, what's your engagement score at the moment? On a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being can't get out of bed, 10 being I'm super switched on, achieving flow state, maximum productivity.
Yeah.
Where are you? Being from 0 to 10, 6 or a 7. Okay. What would it take for you to change that 6 to a 7? Oh, well, I probably need to introduce a little bit more structure, maybe some more boundaries, take a bit more downtime, whatever it might be. Sometimes just putting a number on it gives you a subjective value on that situation.
I think Yeah, like a lot of people are numbers driven anyway.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, mate. Final question that I've got for you is just around advice. So I've got it written down. What advice would you give to someone who feels they're stuck in an addictive behaviour and wants to make a change?
What advice would I give to someone
who feels that they're stuck in an addictive behaviour or habit and wants to make a change?
That's an interesting question. I'd ask them, if you could take yourself out to that point where you've shifted your addiction, what would be different? Because wanting a change is one thing, but as you've said already,
Vision, innit?
the vision. What's the vision?
What are the benefits that will come from making the change?
If you got rid of that addiction, what would change for you? What is it you're looking to achieve? Once you can define that, it becomes a lot easier to step into that reality. But just saying that you want to change isn't going to get you there, because I said that I wanted to change time after time after time, and every single time I'd go back into destructive behaviors. You need a compelling reason. What is it that's going to drag you out of that destructive behavioral pattern that you're stuck in? If you shifted it, how would you know? What would change for you?
Who benefits?
Who benefits? Yeah, that's another question. Who are you doing this for? Is it for you or is it for someone else?
Yeah.
What will you get out of it?
That's
really
a
powerful,
question.
man. What will you get out of it if you end this addiction?
Got me thinking about stuff now. Thank you, brother.
That's what we do. We plant seeds. Thank you, bro.
Man.
Been a
Thank
pleasure.
you. No, I really enjoyed that.